Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 147. It is the possibility of a dream coming true that makes life interesting. Paulo Coelho.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Hollywood Camera Work. If you guys are interested in learning how to direct actors and become an actor's director, Hollywood Camera Work has developed an amazing master course called Directing Actors. And it is almost 30 hours. And I've taken this course, and it is by far the most comprehensive directing actors course I have ever seen. So if you want to get access to this course, head over to HollywoodCameraWork.com and use the coupon code HUSTLE to get 30% off. That's HollywoodCameraWork.com and use the coupon code HUSTLE. Today's show is also sponsored by Inside the Edit. If you guys want to learn about editing and the creative process of editing, there is no better resource than Inside the Edit. Now, the creator of it, Patty Bird, has been a multiple-time guest on Indie Film Hustle. He's well-respected by Avid, by the Editors Union, by everybody. I mean, what he's been able to put together is absolutely remarkable. So if you want to get more information about that, head over to InsideTheEdit.com and use the coupon code HUSTLE to get 25% off. That's InsideTheEdit.com and use the coupon code HUSTLE for 25% off. So I'm asked all the time, what is the best investment you can make as a filmmaker? You know, if you're going to buy your own gear, what should you buy? And I always say the same thing: glass, lenses, because no matter how, amazing the new camera is, you need good glass, and good glass could last you quite a long time. So I wanted to reach out to the Yoda, if you will, the guru of lenses. This is the guy who all the cinematographers in LA go to when they've got a question about glass or about lenses. His name is Matthew Duclos. Matthew has been, his father opened up Duclos Lenses years ago, and he mentored underneath him, and he's become basically the Yoda of cinema lenses and photographic lenses, as you'll hear in this interview. I really wanted to go deep down the rabbit hole of lenses because there's so much misinformation out there about what's good lens, what's bad glass, what's good glass. Can you use photo lenses on your DSLR and shoot a movie with it? Do you need to buy full-blown, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 primes? Is it going to make that big of a difference? Can you shoot with a Rokinon set, or can you shoot with a Sigma art lens like I did? This is Meg. Most of it was shot on the Rokinons and that Sigma 18-35, which is a gorgeous lens, which is under $1,000. What is the truth, if you will, about lenses? So I wanted to really just beat up poor Matthew and ask him everything I've ever wanted to know about glass, about what's better, Canon or Zeiss, what's the difference between Cooke and Sigma, and who's doing good glass, and what's the difference with vintage glass, and how does light refract and everything. So in this episode, we're going to go deep, geek. All right. So if you guys are interested in knowing a lot about lenses, then continue to listen, because we're going to go pretty deep into lenses. And by the end of this, it's kind of like a little mini masterclass about cinema lenses and about photographic lenses and just about lenses in general and how they can help make your project stand out. So without any further ado, here is my interview with Matthew Duclos of Duclos Lenses. I'd like to welcome to the show Matthew Duclos. Duclos. Thanks for doing the show, man.
No problem.
Appreciate it, man. So, you and your company have become very legendary through the underworld of the film industry for being the place to go to for lenses. How is that? How did you guys do that?
I couldn't tell you. I can give you the history. We just sort of, kept to it, kept our noses to the grindstone, and, did what we do best. I can give you a quick history on I guess, where we came from and
Yeah, absolutely.
how we started all that.
Yeah, I like to know that, and then also your personal history of what makes you love lenses as much as you do.
Sure, sure. So started, my personal history and the company history started with my father. He worked for Ingenue back in the late 70s on the East Coast. Ingenue had a presence here in the U.S., in New Hampshire. And he worked for them for quite a while. Started, I can't remember what he said his first job was, but he started basically at the very, very bottom, essentially grinding glass. And sort of worked his way up. He liked what they were doing in the service department, said, I want to do that. It's very hands-on, very technical. So he moved into servicing Ingenue lenses. In about I think it was the late 90s, the guys at Claremont Camera, Denny and Terry, moved my dad and our entire family out here to L.A. To head up the service department at Claremont Camera. And that was sort of my intro. I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time. And I always remember my fondest memories, and I was actually just telling somebody about this the other day. My fondest memories of their old building that they were in was me and my siblings running around the prep floor, grabbing like 100-foot, not 100, big spans of film, spent film.
What is this film you speak of?
Exactly, yeah. And it was just, we thought it was the coolest thing. We'd hold it up to a light and, wonder why we couldn't see the pictures or whatever, but we didn't understand at the time. So, so anyways, he did that for a while, and then moved on to working with a guy named Kish, who made, most people would know him from the Director's Finder, the Ultimate Director's Finder, which both of them ended up getting an Academy Award for. Wow. And then after that, just sort of wanted to do his own thing. And that's when we started Duclos Lenses in 2002, I think, which actually, I think this year, this year, I didn't even think of that until just now. It's 15 years. Yeah.
15-year anniversary. I smell a fire sale on the website coming up. Yeah.
More like a parking lot barbecue, but sure.
Sure. Either way, potato.
Yeah. But, we just sort of like to do what we do. We're not trying to dominate the industry or anything. All of our technicians love lenses. We're just a group of guys and gals that love lenses and love tweaking them and tuning them and getting the best out of them. And everybody here loves what they do.
And also just playing around and just tweaking, like you said, tweaking them and just seeing what other images you can get out of lenses and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, what makes a good cinema lens?
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. Deep question.
Horses for courses. That's I try to say that. I try to instill that as much as possible. A good cinema lens is not really defined by specs. It's defined by the scenario, what the person's shooting, the cinematographer and what they want. And the way the industry is going is a perfect example. On paper, the best lenses you can get, like Master Primes or Summilux Cs, from a technical standpoint, they're the best you can get. But if you're shooting a period piece and you want a vintage look and something very stylized, those aren't the lenses for you. Right. So it's all about what you're shooting and how you're shooting it. I don't think there's a bad lens out there. It's just different lenses for different purposes.
And I think a lot of filmmakers, especially indie filmmakers and young filmmakers, they get all caught up in the gear. I call it the gear porn. And look, both you and I are gear guys. We like gear, but that's the thing. Like, I need the best. Well, it's a very variable answer there. Like you just said, like if you're trying to shoot Barry Lyndon, you're not going to grab brand new Master Primes. It might not be the look that you're looking for. So, yeah, I think that's a great answer. I'm so glad you said it. Now, what are some of the differences between some of the industry standard or industry leaders in lenses like Cook Lenses, Zeiss, and any other major brands of lenses that you can you discuss?
Differences in
personality, because I know, sure. And this is just for me working and also listening and talking to DPs. Zeiss has a little bit of a sharper edge than Cook. Cook's a little softer. It's maybe because of the coating. I don't know. So you tell me what kind of personalities they have, because they do have personalities, right?
Some of that's been lost over the decades. Not so much with Cooke. Cooke has really always had their look, the Cooke look, and they've done a really good job of sticking to it, despite the entire industry trying to make things better, faster, cleaner. Cooke has really stuck to their guns, and they make some absolutely gorgeous lenses. They may not test well on a projector, or MTF charts may not look great, but the images that they produce, nobody will argue that those are just beautiful images. And Zeiss too. Zeiss has gone a little bit off course. I don't know that they would have a defined look, especially because their glass comes from so many different sources these days. Some of it's still in Germany. It comes from Japan. It's difficult when you have such a broad range of sources to keep a cohesive look.
So does Cooke? So in other words, does Cooke all still source all their glass from the same source? So that's what kind of keeps their vibe going?
As far as I know, everything that Cooke makes is right there in Leicester, UK.
Oh, really? Okay, so that, and then Zeiss used to be that way, but now they're kind of like sourcing from all over the place. So it's a little harder to maintain consistency as far as looks are concerned.
Right.
And any other major?
You're absolutely right. There's no doubt that Cooke and Zeiss, I mean, if you compare the two, Zeiss is always going to be a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more neutral. A lot of people like to say that Zeiss is cool, but it's actually not. It's just sort of more neutral than Cooke or their Ingenue. But yeah, it's not that one's better than the other. They're just different.
Right. Now, Ingenue is, from my, and again, I have a little bit of understanding about lenses, but Ingenue, to my knowledge, was one of the best zoom lenses you can buy, and it might still be, if I'm not mistaken.
From a technical standpoint,
yes.
Again, we're looking at different lenses for different purposes.
Okay.
There's no question that 24-290 has been an absolute staple in the industry. Anybody shooting a feature film or a commercial, anything with a big budget, you can almost guarantee there's a 24-290 on set somewhere.
Right, and they're like monsters. I've worked with them. They're huge lenses, and those
spec wise, I think the most accurate zoom you can get these days is probably going to come from Fujinon.
Yeah, I've heard very good things about Fujinon too. Accurate meaning as far as specs are concerned?
Accurate as far as resolution, contrast, overall sharpness, edge-to-edge sharpness. For Super 35 pictures, those Fujinon Premier zooms are about the best you can get.
Now, Canon obviously has a long history of lenses as well, and they've kind of made their way into the cinema world now after being in photography for so long. What's your opinion on the Canon lenses that are now more cinema lenses versus the photo lenses? Are there major differences between the two?
There's absolutely major differences. In the zooms, I think the Canon's cinema zooms are among the most underrated in the industry. Because they're so readily available, and they have the Canon name on them, they sort of drop in value real quick, and they get, they change hands pretty frequently. But they really do perform well. There's not a whole lot of trickery in them. They're just a good, solid, reliable cinema lens. Anytime somebody says I don't like them, they're usually saying that because of the look. They'll say, "Oh, well, they're too warm," or "Oh, I don't like the way the focus falls off," or something like that. But from a mechanical standpoint and an actual usability standpoint, they're great. All of their cinema zooms are purpose-built zooms. The primes are based on their photo lenses, so they're really, you kind of know what to expect. They do tweak a little bit in the coatings. They add a couple elements to compensate to make them all really consistent lens to lens. But yeah, those, I really do applaud Canon for not just taking a 24-105 and making it a cine lens, slapping some gears on it or whatever.
Right. They actually took the time to actually develop their cinema lenses.
Exactly. The zooms. Yeah.
Now, in your opinion, which cinema lenses out there right now is the best bang for your buck? Because these are pricey things. I mean, the stuff that we're talking about are $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 lenses, but there's been a whole industry wrapped around now creating affordable cinema lenses like the Viedras and the Rokinons, Tokina. What, in your opinion, are some of the best lenses, best bang for your buck?
For primes, as much as people don't like to acknowledge them, I think the Rokinon stuff, for what it is and the price that you're getting, the price that you're paying, it's almost unbeatable. I have absolutely no doubt that they are flawed. They're not perfect optics by any means.
Mm-hmm.
But for that price, they're, that's hard to beat for a manual operating. Again, it's adapted from a photo lens, but for fully manual operation, that's tough to beat.
I have a set. I have a set myself. I love that. I love those lenses.
Yeah. They're certainly going to get the job done. There's no question about it. They're not going to perform. Nobody is trying to compare them to Master Primes or Summilexes. But at that price, it's almost unbeatable.
And then how about for zooms?
Zooms, I would probably have to say the Sigma Cine zooms are the best bang for the buck, which again is just an adapted photo lens. But what you get in those at a T2, everyone's got complaints. The focus breathing's not great. They're only Super 35. They're not full frame. Whatever. But for the price, for a T2 zoom that's fully manual, can't beat it. You really can't.
No, I just got the 50 to 100 Sigma, but it's not the cinema. It's the photo. Same exact glass. It just doesn't have the gears, which I can work around for $1,000. But it's stunning. The what is it called? The portrait lenses.
The art series.
Yeah, the art series. Oh my God, they're gorgeous though. I mean, I've put it up on charts, and it really does perform well. Again, for the money, it's insane. Really is insane. And I think that's a lot of things that filmmakers really have to understand, that you don't have to have. When you have lower budgets, look, when you have big budgets, my God, if I had a budget, I'd be using Cooks and Ingenues all day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But for the independent filmmaker, I mean, there are so many more options, even in the last 5 years, than there was. Yeah. I mean, you've been around, so you've seen how. I mean, can you imagine a cinema lens for under $5,000?
No way. If somebody told me that 10 years ago there was going to be, a high quality prime lens for under $500, I would have laughed. I said, no way. It's coming from China or whatever. No way.
Exactly.
But yeah, and here we are. I really do think that we're in the next golden age of lenses right now. It's still happening. It's still evolving, but it's such a booming market. It's great.
What's your opinion on the Sigmas, the new cinema lenses on the Sigmas, and just Sigma in general?
I really like what they're doing. Similar to Cook, like we were saying before, Sigma is one of the only manufacturers that they keep everything under one roof from start to finish. I mean, the entire lenses are all built in their one factory in Aizu. They don't outsource anything. They're not getting components from anywhere else. That, to me, that's really respectable. Maybe some people consider that old school, but I really do respect that. And I think Sigma moving forward is going to be setting the bar for the big guys.
Yeah, because I just shot with the new cinema primes that just came out. Or not the primes, but the new zoom. Is it the 18 to 35 cinema and the 50 to 100 cinema?
Exactly.
And it's stunning. It's absolutely, and they're $5,000. I think it's $4,500 or something like that.
I think this is just Sigma getting their feet wet.
Yep.
I think moving forward, they're going to have a lot of really cool stuff to show everyone.
And by the way, a free plug for you. So my DP did purchase your case for those lenses.
Nice.
He goes, make sure he let him know that Austin said hi.
Okay.
So you were talking a little bit about breathing before, focus breathing. Can you talk a little bit more about, the breathing of, like when you're pulling focus on a zoom, what's an acceptable amount of breathing? Are there any zoom lenses that don't breathe, or do they all breathe? And can you just explain what that concept is?
So breathing is one of those things that a lot of people misunderstand, especially people that are new to the world of cinema. In photography, nobody really cares about breathing. It still happens, but you're taking a photo at a fraction of a second, and it is what it is. Breathing is when you rack focus on your cinema lens, and the field of view changes ever so slightly. It gives sort of for lack of a better term, a breathing effect. So your field of view increases and decreases just a little bit, almost as if you're zooming while you're focusing. What a lot of people misunderstand that for is when you rack focus and the lens telescopes in and out, they assume that means breathing, physical movement of the lens barrel itself. Which, I mean, some people do call that breathing. We call that non-constant volume. So what breathing really is that optical mechanical flaw of when the field of view changes back and forth. Higher cost cinema zooms do compensate for that and can nearly eliminate it. But it's definitely a consideration when designing a zoom.
Yeah, I mean, but I've seen breathing in Oscar-winning, amazing films. Especially the older ones. It just was there, and you could see it. It was, and even when I didn't even know what breathing was, I was like, "What happened there?" Like you just notice it. But it's
you
done.
See it a lot in anamorphic zooms too. If you're watching any film that was shot with an anamorphic zoom, even major stuff like Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
you see breathing.
Jaws.
It's just there.
Yeah, it's just there. It's not something that you have to like. Oh my god, it's just the nature of what you're shooting.
Yeah. And there's an acceptable amount. I mean, like you were saying with that Sigma 50 to 100, that lens does breathe a lot.
It does.
There's no question.
It does.
But it's how you use it. There's ways to get around that. Don't do a focus pull from 5 feet to infinity, and you won't notice it as much.
Right. Work around it a little bit that's another great piece of advice is that when you don't have all the money in the world to buy the best lenses or the best cameras, you work with what you have and just work around it. Be creative, especially with lenses. Like I shot my feature on basically the Rokinons and the Sigma 18 to 35, I think it is, and I shot it on a Blackmagic 2.5, and it didn't cover the sensor because I couldn't cover the sensor all the way. Or there's cropping. I mean, it was cropping because of the sensor. And people were like, "What do you do? Like, you're losing all that crop." I'm like, "Dude, just if you don't think about it, it's not there. Reframe, reframe."
Exactly.
Don't get caught up in that kind of stuff. Now,
crop factor is a topic that I could. I mean, I can't believe in today's day and age of the internet, there's so much bad information out there on the whole concept of crop factor, and people still call me at least once a week that just can't wrap their head around crop factor and how it affects lenses.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
About what crop factor is, because I know it's something that is just. I agree with you. There's so much misinformation out there, and there's so much like negative, like, oh my god, you don't have it, doesn't cover the full lens, you're losing. I'm like, dude, get over yourself. Just look. It's sure but you want to go spend 15 grand on the right lens or 50 grand on the right camera? Knock yourself out.
Yeah, no, it's really. It became a huge problem because people were jumping ship from stills into cinema. Mm-hmm. So the guys that came up shooting Super 35 their whole life, they knew, they were used to the focal lengths they were shooting with. So like a standard set of primes was 18, 25, 35, 50, 85, period. Yeah. And then the guys coming from 35 millimeter full frame still photography into cinema, they had it in their head that everything was wider because they had a larger sensor, and they needed to maintain that field of view for whatever reason. So they had to have all these crop factors in order to achieve the same field of view that they were getting on their 5D Mark I or whatever camera they're coming from.
Right.
So that's where that whole crop factor thing came from, is everybody's just comparing. All the crop factor is comparing your field of view or your sensor size to full frame. Mm-hmm. If you get that full frame exists and you just think about Super 35, that's all that matters. If you're shooting Super 35, don't worry about full frame. Just frame for what format you're shooting.
Now, can you talk the difference between 35 and Super 35 and full frame?
Super 35 was sort of the original format for that type of film, the 135 film.
Sure.
When you in a cinema camera, it's going up and down. When you turn that film sideways, mm-hmm. that's where you get that 24 by 36, 35 millimeter full frame. Mm-hmm. So it's the same film. It's just 90 degrees. You get a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So Super 35, that size sort of preceded full frame 35. These days, the term Super 35 kind of gets thrown around since it's not really. Nobody really sticks to that standard anymore. Like Red's new helium sensor, they call it the 8K Super 35. Mm-hmm. It's not really Super 35. It's actually a little bit wider. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of tricky to talk about because people don't really obey the rules that were put in place a long time ago.
Yeah, it's pretty much a it's wild west right now.
A little bit, yeah. Even full frame, Red's new 8K VistaVision, it's really not the same as old school VistaVision. It's again a little bit wider, a little bit shorter, so your image circle requirements are a little bit different.
Now, can you talk a little bit about, because now you just brought up 8K. I mean, a lot of these vintage lenses and just lenses that are being made today when will they eventually just be obsolete where you can't use them on these 8K, 12K, 24K, 60K cameras that will be coming out in the next 10 years? At what point do these lenses start becoming obsolete? And at what point, because I know optics have been trying to catch up, or cameras have been trying to catch up to optics, or optics have been trying to catch up to camera sensors since this whole thing started back in basically 2004, 2005 when Red kind of came on the scene.
So that's another sort of pet peeve I have. 8K. So a lot of people will always ask about, is this lens going to resolve or is this lens going to cover, which are two completely different things. There's a huge difference between resolution and sensor size.
Okay.
Again, a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down.
Right.
But it all comes down to marketing. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the lens manufacturers, because they started labeling their lenses 4K or 4K compatible,
right?
They, excuse me, they sort of shot themselves in the foot. To say that a lens resolves 4K, it's a little bit misleading.
Mm-hmm.
You always have to sort of specify the sensor size along with the resolution. So, for example, 4K on, I don't know, 4K on a full frame sensor.
Mm-hmm.
You've got however many pixels. The pixels are what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. You have to cut all that out. So let me start that part over. So 4K on a full frame sensor is a very specific resolution. You have a very specific number of pixels. If you take that same resolution and then shrink it down to something like a Blackmagic, which is micro four thirds, you have the same number of pixels, but all of a sudden you're cramming those into half the size, which means 4K on that Blackmagic has a much, much higher resolution requirement than it does on your full frame 4K sensor. So to say that a lens resolves 4K is a little bit misleading because you're not specifying what size those pixels are. And anybody that labeled their lens 4K compatible or 4K ready, whatever, they just shot themselves in the foot, because now that we have 6K and 8K and 10K coming out, what do you say to those people? Now your lens doesn't work? No, it works fine. You just thought that you were being clever labeling your lens 4K.
Right. So do these lenses, do the lenses that are being made today, will that work on an 8K, on a 10K?
In terms of resolving power, on 8K, yeah, no problem. I have never had a lens put on a camera, and looked through the viewfinder or looked at the LCD and thought, oh man, that's a bummer. It's not resolving. Mm-hmm. You get the picture. It's there. You just have varying degrees of micro contrast. It's not like there's a cutoff point where it doesn't work. Lenses are a completely analog, organic factor. So they're always going to work. They're always going to function. You're just going to have lower and lower micro contrast.
So the one thing that we can actually say safely, and I think I've always told this to people, if you're going to invest in a kit or in gear, lenses are things that don't go out of style. In other words, if you buy a camera today, in a year or two, it will be won't be up to date. While if you spend a lot of money on lenses today, those lenses will be good probably for the next 15, 20 years, if not longer, correct?
Yes. And I generally don't say that. I try not to say that because it sounds like a sales pitch. It just sounds like I'm, selling you the lens. Don't do this, do that. Right. But that is true. It's the lenses. Look at the stuff that's fashionable right now. The Super Baltars and the Kowas. Those were from the 50s, 60s, 70s. And you can't find them quick enough. Everybody wants them.
Can you talk a little bit about vintage glass? Because since you brought it up, because I've actually shot with the Super Baltars. They're gorgeous. I mean, and we shot them on reds.
Oh, they're phenomenal.
On reds.
I would say of any lens out there, if I was going to shoot something that didn't need to be clinical and clean, the Super Baltars are my choice. For a spherical lens, you can't beat that look. It's such a pleasing, stylized look that you cannot replicate. I mean, you could put stuff through post all you want. You're not going to get the look of the Super Baltars.
And what does it do? Like, what are the characteristics of the Super Baltars? It's just, I mean, obviously it softens the image just a bit, especially with that harsh red sensor sometimes that can be really too clinical. It just softens it up, especially with actors or actresses' faces. They love you for it. But I've shot multiple things with it. They're gorgeous. But what are the things? What are the characteristics of the Super Baltars that you like?
It's kind of hard to describe because they don't stay consistent. For example, the 35 millimeter Super Baltar, no matter what, every single 35 millimeter I've ever seen has been warmer and softer than the rest of the set. So it's hard to put a pin in the entire set. But if I had to describe them with sort of a broad stroke, I'd say low contrast. Slightly warmer than most other lenses, and just the bokeh, the way the focus falls off is just beautiful.
It is pretty gorgeous. And now that's another thing I always told people too when they're shooting super digital, like not super digital, but like shooting with reds, especially the 5, 6, 8K kind of stuff, depending on what you're trying to do. Because I just saw like clips from the Guardians of the Galaxy was just shot on 8K. It's super clinical, super crisp, super clean. Makes perfect sense for that kind of story, without question.
Yeah, I don't know what lenses they ended up going with for that.
I don't know neither. But it looks fairly clinical. I mean, without question. There's no soft edges or anything. It looks really, but that's perfect for that kind of movie. But generally, because I do a lot of color grading and I do a lot of posts, so a lot of DPs a lot of times ask me, or filmmakers ask me, I'm shooting with the red, what lenses do you recommend? I go, I always tell them, try to find vintage glass if you can, depending on what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to do something softer and to take that digital bite off of it, those vintage glass will probably help you out. Do you agree with that?
I do.
And
I do to a degree, but it's just like you said, with that caveat, if you're trying to take that edge off, yeah, absolutely. Just grab an older lens.
And I remember that for a while, like the 16 millimeter glass started to like you could give it away almost. And then when the digital revolution came up, they became the hot commodity because they're a really amazing glass. And can you talk a little bit about super 16 millimeter glass and what a bargain it is, especially if you're shooting with, let's say, a pocket camera, like a Blackmagic pocket camera, or some of these smaller sensor digital cameras?
I think it's still underrated. I think people still haven't quite caught on like they did with something like the super speeds. 16 format is still sort of the I mean, always has been, but it's still sort of that, you couldn't afford 35 millimeter.
Right. It always is. Right.
It's unfortunate because it's such, like you said, there's so much good glass out there.
Affordable.
That's one of the lenses I actually cut my teeth on was the Canon 8-64. It's a great zoom lens. It's phenomenal. It gives you that super wide angle that you need to compensate for the crop factor. And it's just a great sharp lens. It's not too heavy. It's not too bulky. Even 16 format super speeds, that stuff is out there and it's attainable. But people are so wrapped up in bigger is better. They want full frame. They want VistaVision. They want Alexa 65.
But
everything else is getting thrown by the wayside because of that.
But or they could just focus on telling a good story.
Exactly. Courses for courses. I mean, it's the same with every factor of cinema lenses. The right tool for the right job.
Right. Now, how do you test a good lens to see if it's any good?
Oh, where do I begin? Here at our shop, there's a couple of tools that we'll use. So we do testing all day, every day. That's like, everybody sort of knows us now for selling lenses. Our primary business always has been, always will be servicing lenses, making sure they're as good as they can be. testing lenses, I'd say our primary tool for doing that is our test projector.
Mm-hmm.
So we're literally, there's a test target, a reticle, if you will, at the film plane, and we're testing how the lens performs essentially backwards, as it would be. Instead of putting a picture at the film plane, we have a picture at the film plane, we're projecting it onto a wall. And that's sort of the bread and butter. There's a whole bunch of other tools. We use a T-stop bench to measure light. We have several collimators for checking flange depth. Not just flange depth, we also use a collimator for axial alignment. We have a vertical one, so we can check how well the optics are aligned on their axis. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of tools we use.
Now, is there anything that the independent filmmaker can do to test a lens on their own, just either with charts or any basic test that they could just go, hey, make sure this is a good lens?
Yes and no. You could throw it on a camera and see what it does. Mm-hmm. That's sort of step one. If you're getting a picture, you're getting a picture.
Right.
But, when you're testing lenses on a camera, you're not just testing the lens. Then you're testing the camera. You're testing the recording format. Then you're testing the monitor. And, I can't stand it when people say, oh, I saw this lens test on YouTube. While I definitely understand the value of watching test results on YouTube, mm-hmm. then you're looking at what the lens did, then what the camera did, then what the codec did, then what the export did, then what the upload compression did, then what the monitor is. It's like there's so many layers between the lens and how you're viewing it on your monitor. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely no consistency to it at all.
Right. You really need to see it by eye as opposed to...
Yeah, and that's why we use our test projector. Some other places use MTF benches, which are very, very useful. Mm-hmm. And we actually have sort of a makeshift MTF bench here, mm-hmm. but it's not... I've seen lenses that MTF really, really high, mm-hmm. and then they suck on the camera. They just don't produce a good picture. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. I've seen lenses that MTF really low, and they make absolutely stunning images.
It basically, at the end of the day, is throw it on a camera, record it, and see what it looks like.
Exactly.
That's step one. And then you can get into the nuances or have someone like you or another repair shop actually test it for you to make sure we're good. On it. Now, you do a lot of repairs and maintenance on lenses, as you've said. Can you tell me a story of the world's craziest case of what someone sent you to fix or repair?
I wouldn't say that it was sent to repair. It's actually one of the lenses we have here in our lobby.
Okay.
Anybody that's in LA will remember there was a fire on the back lot of Universal Studios about 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And a customer of ours, he's been a customer for a long time. We serviced his stuff many, many times. Very, very low-key cinematographer. Does a lot of commercials, very, very quiet. His stuff was all on that soundstage, prepping for a commercial the next day. And everything went up in flames. And he talked to the fire department afterwards, said, can I go pick through that, the rubble after they bulldozed it to try and find my stuff? And he found his 24-290 and a couple other, I think it was a Super Speed and an Ultra Prime. Oh, no, sorry, it's S4. Mm-hmm. And he brought them to us and said, hey, can you fix these? And they're just, they're so far beyond and metal. I would say that's probably the strangest. Obviously, he was joking. He didn't expect us to fix it. But he gave it to us because we had serviced that lens probably a dozen times throughout its life. So it's kind of sad to see that all that hard work was just gone.
Right. Well, I'm sure. I hope he had insurance.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that sits in your lobby as a.
Yep. It's here.
It has a good resting place, I have to say.
Exactly.
It has a good resting place.
I would say the coolest one was probably a Kubrick lens. Everybody knows that famous Kubrick lens. A customer of ours brought one in, completely original, unmodified.
But is it actually? Was it an actual Kubrick lens?
Yeah. So the story behind it was Kubrick bought all of them that NASA didn't buy, mm-hmm. And they converted a bunch of them for use on that particular camera, and then they kept one lens completely untouched in case one of the other lenses that they modified broke because they couldn't get spare parts from Zeiss since they were all gone.
Right.
So this one lens that wasn't modified ended up in our hands, and it's. I mean, I don't think even Zeiss has one. That was pretty cool.
And that sits in your lobby as well?
No, that's locked in the vault. That doesn't ever leave the vault.
Has anyone shot with it, or is it just
We've kind of shot with it. It's the distance from the rear glass, the rear element to the film plane is about 4 millimeters.
Mhm.
So you can't use it on any camera that has an OLPF because you just don't have enough space.
What is an OLP? Say that again. What is that?
Low pass filter.
Oh, okay.
Because even the distance from the low pass filter to the sensor, that's probably 5 to 10 millimeters, somewhere in that range by itself. So you can't have anything at all in front of the sensor. So I've put it on for photography. I shoot with Fuji stuff, and they don't use a low pass filter since they have their X-Trans sensor.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on there, and it's pretty interesting.
It's an interesting look, to say the least.
Yeah.
How
exactly.
wide is that one?
It's a 50 millimeter.
It's a 50, and what's the f-stop?
It's a 0.7.
Jesus. Now, since we're on Kubrick, and I'm a Kubrick fanatic, I've and anyone listening to this podcast knows that I absolutely adore Kubrick, and I've read everything about him. Can you talk a little bit about that glass that he used and what was so important, specifically about the Barry Lyndon glass, which is a legendary glass that he used? And I'm assuming you went to the Kubrick exhibit when it was here at the LACMA?
Of course.
And did you see that?
Oh yeah.
The HAL lens. Oh.
Yep.
So can
I
you?
saw all that. That was a trip for me. I'll go to museums, especially stuff at LACMA, at the Getty, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always, it's cool stuff, photography or art, form or another. But this one was like, it's like someone built a museum exhibit for me.
Yeah, exactly. All the lenses were laid out, and there's DPs discussing how he used them and stuff. It's just.
And I'm looking at all this exhibit. I'm like, I've taken that lens apart 10 times. I've done that one 1,000 times. Like, just it was beautiful. It was so much fun for me.
So, can you talk a little bit about what made those Barry Lyndon that glass on Barry Lyndon so revolutionary for its time?
Well, the speed was the primary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just having that 0.75 aperture, that was like, even to this day, I don't think it's really been done for that format size. You can find some really weird, obscure stuff that's meant for like X-ray machines, but doesn't even cover a micro four thirds sensor. I think that was the most unique part about those, was just that ultra shallow depth of field of a 0.75 lens.
Now, what was the next level up? What was the next fastest lens available at the time? Give or take. Like a 2.8?
I think they had the super speeds out, so you'd have like a T13.
Okay, so but that extra, what is it, 0.5?
We never T-stopped the Kubrick lens. I don't know how much light was actually coming out the back of the lens. Because it was an f.75, so it was probably like maybe a T1 or 1.2. I'd have to actually test it.
I'm glad. Now I'm sure after this interview you'll go and play with it.
I don't know. That's our T-stop bench we nicknamed the Heartbreaker because everybody thinks they have the T13 or T14 speeds, and then we put them on and we say, well, the manufacturer stretched a little bit. It's more like a T17. So I don't want it. I just want to leave that Kubrick lens as is. That's history. I don't want to test it.
Oh, that's funny. But and then also the film emulsion back then was just not able to wasn't as sensitive as film today or even digital. Right. So that was that's how he was able to light basically by candlelight.
Exactly. Yeah, you needed a fast lens to do it back then.
And it's such a gorgeous. You need a fast lens to do it now too, but also the resolution of these cameras. Have you played with the Sony A7S II?
Oh yeah.
That's a sick camera.
Yeah.
That sensor is pretty. You can see in the dark.
Yeah, it's almost not fair.
It really. I have one of those. It's just I was just doing a test with it the other day, and I wasn't even looking under the couch where there's no light. And I'm like, damn it, I see everything under the couch. It's pretty insane. Now, can you talk a little bit about coatings on lenses, coated versus uncoated? Because I know you sell some uncoated lenses, and why do DPs want uncoated lenses as opposed to coated? And what is a coat in the first place?
So coatings, the primary purpose of a coating really is to to increase or maintain really light transmission. The purpose of the coating is to allow light to pass through the glass as efficiently as possible. A byproduct of the coating is characteristics of the lens, like the color, sometimes how the focus falls off, sometimes sort of weird, obscure bokeh that you get depending on how the polishing and the coating pair up. But the primary purpose of the coatings is to make the lens more efficient, to increase that t-stop reading. Uncoated lenses, where we strip the coatings, that's actually a huge misconception. For example, the Super Baltars. People think that the coatings on those, that there are no coatings, that they just shipped them without coatings, which is completely untrue. They were shitty coatings back then.
Right.
And a lot of times people will call us to remove the coatings from their lenses to give them a more vintage look. And they'll call us and say, I want all the coatings stripped. And I say, no, you don't. If we strip all the coatings, it just won't work. You'll have so much light loss, so much image quality loss that you're going to be left with garbage.
Right.
So anytime we do pursue that, it's a very, very meticulous, very tedious process where we usually start with the front element, which is sometimes a mistake. It's all trial and error. We're doing one project right now for a company who I can't even talk about the lenses we're doing. It's essentially there's a recipe. Anytime we're taking the coatings off of a lens, it's certain surfaces of certain elements, and it's all trial and error. We go back and forth. Then we replace the element with a brand new one if we go too far, go to the next element down. I think the project that we've been working on right now is probably about maybe 3 months in, and we're still tuning them, still getting the right recipe. So it's all trial and error to get a specific look. And that look is usually increasing the flares, giving it a little more character, increasing how highlights bloom, that sort of thing.
Now, you used to, I don't know if you still do. I remember a while ago you used to sell the Rokinons, a set of the primes uncoated. Did you guys still do that?
I pulled the plug on that.
Okay.
We did it for a couple people. At the time, like I said, that recipe that we had for each lens, which I still have, I probably should do it again.
Okay.
But the labor involved in getting to each of those elements and the time it takes to polish them, the cost to do that uncoating process ended up costing more than the lenses did themselves.
Got you. So if there's anybody out there who still has those, very valuable.
I think the one set that we did initially was for a company in Australia, and they were stolen. I don't know where they are now.
Oh, Jesus.
And when they call back to say, "Can we get more?" I said, "Sorry, we're not going to do any more."
Right.
And I think there was one other set that a private owner had. I have no idea if he still has them. But yeah, they're unique. They're definitely unique. And I might actually pull that recipe out and use it again, because now they have the Rokinon zines, which are the same glass. So I can use that same recipe, and it would probably, in the case of the zines, it may end up being worthwhile because they're priced higher than the regular Rokinons were.
Right. Of course. Now, are there any other uncoated? Because I know a friend of mine had a set of Cooks, uncoated Cooks. Are there other manufacturers actually making uncoated lenses?
Yeah, Cook does that now.
Okay.
Cook, they do that for they started doing it with the mini S4s, where you could buy a replacement element that was uncoated. And I think they announced it. I don't know if they're doing it, but they worked with Camtech here in LA to get essentially what I just said about, a recipe. They have a specific recipe where certain elements are uncoated. And I think they're doing that with the regular S4s.
Now, so from what you're saying is that lenses basically have a combination of a few different elements to create the actual look of that lens, whether it be where the glass is manufactured, how it's put together, and then on top of that, then you throw the mysterious coating on that. If it varies in the batch that they make, it could adjust the look of that lens, though obviously you pay those high prices because everything is systematic on Cooks or Zeiss or things like that, generally speaking. But There is there's a variables of making lenses. So just because you buy two of the exact same lens doesn't mean you're going to get exactly the two same looks, correct?
Right.
Unless you're paying those high-end prices for like those, a full prime set of Cooks, all are going to be balanced, all are going to be same color temperature and so on, correct?
That's actually, now that I think about it, the look of a lens, the consistency, even in something lower cost like a Rokinon, we'll have some customers that want to buy Rokinons, but they want sort of a tailored set. They want them color matched, which we'll do because we keep a ton of them here. So we'll sort of cherry pick and find the best ones. And even within Rokinon, something as cheap as that, we only find I think the most I ever saw was like a 5% variance in color shift.
Which is, you can't even tell, basically.
You can definitely. Like if you're shooting a white wall, a completely blank white wall, or something where the color is very neutral or supposed to be neutral, you will see it, but it's so minor. My point being, the manufacturers that are really taking that into consideration, it's a big deal. Like they have to go through a lot to get that extra couple percent.
Right. But when you're spending, a set of Cook Super, was it S4s? What are the most expensive primes out there? Is it Cook?
No. Most expensive primes, probably Master Anamorphics, maybe.
Okay. And I'm assuming they all match perfectly?
They should. They better at that price.
They better.
I don't think I've ever done the color test on those, but I've actually never heard anyone complain. So either they think they're good or they are good.
Right. It's like when you buy a Mercedes or a Ferrari, no pun intended, or a Lamborghini, you're like, it drives fine.
Yeah.
Because you just spent $180,000 on it.
Exactly. You expect it to perform well.
Exactly. Now, can you talk a little bit about the magical thing called speed boosters? Because that's something that's come up lately, with these adapters, which you can turn a PL mount into a Canon mount and put those glasses on, but also boost the T-stop or the f-stop on those. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually nothing new, really. It's been that product. I can't remember what it used to be called. It was a number because it's the factor. Anyway, I can't remember, but the concept of a focal reducer is nothing new. It's kind of cool in practice. Metabones did a really good job of marketing it.
Yes, they did.
I think originally they were saying that it increases sharpness and this and that, which I don't know about that. That's kind of stretching it. But it is a cool product. I think it's great for what it is.
So if you throw so basically, from what I understand, what it does is just focuses more of the light onto the sensor through the lens.
Correct. Yeah, you're basically condensing the image that you would have had into a smaller area, which is going to increase your light transmission.
So you put a nice fast lens on that through a speed booster through the A7S, and you basically can shoot at night.
Yeah, exactly.
With no lights anywhere in the middle of the desert.
Right.
Now, can you talk a little bit about anamorphic and the concept because that's something that's starting to come back from what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's starting to come back a little bit more. And then, of course, all those beautiful lens flares that JJ created and is known for in his movies. I'm assuming those are anamorphic ones. I'm assuming they didn't do that in post. Right. So can you talk about the concept of anamorphic lenses and why they're so relevant today?
The concept of them is what's most intriguing to me, which I feel like has been lost over time. The reason anamorphic came to be originally was to increase the field of view. You wanted a wider picture with the same lens. It all came down to the field of view. Mm-hmm. These days, it's very, very, very rare to find somebody that's looking to increase the field of view instead of looking for the anamorphic style. These days, anamorphic has become a style choice, not so much a utility. In fact, I think Zeiss experienced that pretty severely when they had their master anamorphics. they were essentially anamorphic, or sorry, they were essentially master primes with a 2x squeeze. So they were these beautiful, super sharp, super crisp lenses with a 2x squeeze, which is what anamorphic is all about. But they didn't produce flares. They didn't produce any unique characteristics. They were still very, very clean. And I can only imagine how much the engineers at Zeiss were crying when they said, okay, well, this is too good. You need to make it worse. We're going to come out with this flare set. So Zeiss came out with that flare set where you replace the front and rear element and basically undid all this engineering that they had put into them.
Right.
Because people said, hey, these are great, but I want more style. I want more flair. I want more character. So for better or worse, however you want to look at it, anamorphic these days has definitely become a style choice. And
getting those lens flares, you know, I've been on set. They actually sometimes they'll actually throw a light into the lens just to kind of flare it out.
Exactly.
What are some of your favorite anamorphic lenses?
Personally, I am a huge proponent of the vintage Kowas.
Okay.
They're so small compared to modern anamorphics. They're fast. They're just a service liability because they are going to break down sooner or later, and there's very, very few parts for those left.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys create parts? Do you guys manufacture parts?
Yeah. If it's something like that, actually, just a couple weeks ago, somebody sent one in that had been dropped, and the chassis of the lens was bent, which is like the main core of the lens.
Sure.
So the only option you have at that point is to find another lens and salvage the parts, or for us to make a whole new part. So we manufactured the core, the chassis of that lens, and replaced it all. And from what I'm told, it's working great in the field so far. Same thing with iris blades on those. The iris blades tend to fail when the lubrication dries up. They can bind and either kink the iris blade or snap the pins off of it. So we manufacture iris blades for those because they're so hard to find. Glass, though, no way. Forget about it.
You guys aren't in the glass making business.
Well, it's not just that. It's that the materials they used back then are outlawed now. You can't use lead. You can't use, some of the stuff that has become radioactive now. You can't use it. It's illegal now. You're not allowed to. And that's actually a funny loophole that Panavision found. I forget where I read this. It might have been like FD Times or something. Panavision gets away with it because they don't sell their equipment.
They only rent it.
Yeah, they only rent it. And you can't use those materials in anything that you're going to sell. But since they have no intention of selling anything, they can still do it.
Can you talk a little bit about Panavision glass? Because I know that's also legendarily good glass. A lot of filmmakers and cinematographers really love that glass. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I know some bits about them. We don't usually see a lot of Panavision glass here. Anytime we do see a Panavision lens come in, we call them up and say, why is this not at your shop?
Right.
Because nothing's really supposed to leave Panavision.
Sure.
And we usually get weird answers like, oh, well, that serial number looks like ours, but we don't have a record of it. And we have to kind of assume that it's okay. But,
right.
If Panavision doesn't say that something's wrong, then who are we to say that something's wrong?
Right.
But Panavision stuff all stays in-house. So I don't have a whole lot of experience diving into their lenses. I have a lot of friends that work at Panavision, lens techs. But their stuff it's unique. We'll say that at the very least. It's
a very unique proprietary system that they've created for their lenses.
A lot of the stuff that they did, in the 80s, 90s was it was produced at the same factory as some of the stuff like Leica in Canada. So it's got that sort of unique classic style. But for their new stuff, I have no idea where it comes from, who's making it, where they source the stuff. But their vintage stuff, that's where they're making bank right now. I mean, they cornered the market on the vintage glass, and they do it really, really well.
I mean, you mean vintage glass? Is it the stuff that they've already created, or they're actually creating the vintage glass look now?
Both. The stuff that they already have that was just sitting on the shelf for decades, and they were like, hey, we could use this. Like all the Hateful Eight stuff.
Yeah.
And they just said, yeah, let's use that. Sure, why not?
They literally found it in a corner somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they hadn't seen it. They hadn't seen
got-
hadn't seen light in like since 1950.
Exactly. They've got cabinets full of vintage stuff like that because they don't sell anything. They don't get rid of it. That they can just sort of pull stuff off the shelf and say, well, let's put a current mount on this and see how it looks.
And
so it works really well for them.
Now you also, you guys also have a line of lenses yourself that you use with Leica lenses. Is that correct?
No.
I saw Duclos. I saw Duclos lenses and then Leica on it. What are those your lenses or?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
On your website, if you go to the lenses section and it says Duclos, you click on it to buy, and then it's
that's probably our. You're probably talking about the 70 to 180.
Yes.
Okay, that's just a lens that we rehoused.
Oh.
It's a Leica 70 to 180. It's an R series lens from, I think that one was like the mid 90s, but that was sort of a pet project of mine that took off. I had one of those lenses a long time ago, which was almost new at the time. I think I was the second owner, and I absolutely loved that lens. And I always told myself if I had the time, I'd do a conversion, make it beautiful, make it a cinema lens. And it just sat on my shelf for like maybe almost 10 years, and I didn't do anything with it. And then Leica started producing all their cine glass, the Summilux Cs and the Summicron Cs, and a bunch of people were asking us to do some kind of zoom that would match those. And as we've got this 70 to 180, let's try it, see how it works. And everybody that I showed it to loved it. It's not a perfect lens. It's got,
personality.
It's got the typical vignette that a Leica has, that really not shallow. It's a really subtle light fall off. It breathes. It's got, character flaws, but it's just a beautiful lens and it matches really well with those. So I was finally able to put that into a cine housing. I sat down with our engineer here and we went over it for like probably a couple months, and it started as just a pet project and then became something that people actually wanted. So it worked really well. Now,
can you talk a little bit about you guys do something called Cinemode, or Cinemod or cinematification. Yep. What exactly is that? Because I know a lot of people have these photo lenses and they want to transform over to cinema mode. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Sure. That was something that started. I'll give you some history on it. We had a customer that was doing stereoscopic macro work, and he had the original Zeiss ZF lenses, not the this was before the ZF2s. And he had to have them like inches, not even like millimeters apart. They had to be as close as possible. And he needed to be able to drive the focus on both of them simultaneously, accurately. So he asked us if we could put some gears on it and take the click stops out of the aperture and a couple other things. We said, sure, why not? And so he, shot that project. I think he was doing something like bugs or something really macro. And he showed some guys, they showed some guys, and we just, sort of kept doing it. We ended up calling it the Cinemod, which we ended up trademarking. And honestly, we never thought that it would be something that the entire industry would want, but we've done, if I had to guess, I'd probably say we've done in the realm of tens of thousands of lenses.
Of course. And that makes absolute sense because people want it. They've already spent a whole lot of money on glass. And if we can make
there's certainly cheaper options out there. You can get zip gears. You can get, you can watch a YouTube tutorial on how to declick your lens.
Yeah.
But we just kind of, we don't ever try to sell people on it. Like, oh, ours is better. But, if you want it done right, you kind of go through us.
And last technical question I want to ask you, because it's something that a lot of people always ask me about: lens mounts and what the industry standard is and why PLs and EFs and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about lens mounts and what is the industry standard?
The industry standard is PL.
Okay.
I think that's pretty firm. Even Panavision does a lot of PL stuff now.
Because they have their own. Panavision has their own mount as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Canon is definitely coming up. It's not anywhere near as robust or reliable as PL mount. But the fact that there's just, Canon has all their ads and everything. They'll show you. It's like, I forget what the number is, like 10 million EF mount lenses in the wild, something like that.
Right.
So just the fact that there's so many lenses available in EF mount, it just sort of became this second option that works well. But it's not a cinema mount. It's not meant to perform as well as a PL mount for cinema. The EF mount itself, unless you have that positive lock feature like the new Red stuff, or I think even the new Canons, the C500 and the I think the C300 Mark II has it, where you actually lock the lens into the mount. The EF mount's just not reliable. It's the only thing holding the lens in there is the bayonets and a little leaf spring.
That's the thing that people don't understand, is that the reason why the PL mount's so reliable is because it's a workhorse. I mean, you could juggle that camera all over the place and that lens is not moving.
Exactly.
But the EF was meant for photo. It was not meant for cinema.
Exactly. It was meant to hold like a pound or two at most. And almost every EF mount out there is made of nickel-plated brass, which is really soft, really flexible. A proper PL mount you're going to find in most cases either stainless steel or titanium.
Right.
The only company I can think of that makes a PL mount lens not out of stainless steel is Canon themselves. Like their cine zooms, they again use brass nickel-plated.
Yeah, and again, it depends on what you're using it for. I mean, obviously, there's so many EF mounts. Like my friend just bought the Sigma cinema lenses in EF mount because the cameras are EF mount, because now the manufacturers know that there's so much EF glass out there. They're like, well, we have to create an EF mount. Before I'd never heard of Canon in cinema. Yeah,
it sort of evolved naturally when digital cinema became the main thing, the mainstream option. Everybody had all their Canon glass already, and they really just wanted to use that Canon glass on whatever camera was out there. So when Red, they got pressured to do it, and Arri got pressured, and Blackmagic jumped in and said, okay, well, we'll do EF mount too. And Canon obviously wants to put EF mount on theirs. It just sort of evolved that way, where they said, well, why not? Nobody makes a camera that's EF only. It's always an option for digital cinema. Like the Arri, it's PL or EF, or the Canons, it's PL or EF. Red is PL or EF, but the default is almost always PL.
Right, on the higher end cinema cameras, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like Blackmagic doesn't. I don't think Blackmagic. I think the new one might have PL, the Ursa Mini, but all the Blackmagic cinemas were all EF or Micro Four Thirds.
Right, that was their thing before.
Yeah, and exactly. So, and one last question before I go into my standard end of the episode questions. What's your favorite lens?
That Kubrick lens. No.
Exactly. Dude, seriously, I would sleep with that thing, honestly, like right next to me on a pillow in a case.
So cinematography-wise, I have massive loads of respect for cinematographers. I don't think I could ever claim to be a cinematographer because of how much respect I have for them and what they do. For me, my lenses, the ones that I own personally, are mostly photography lenses. They're still lenses. And this may sound silly because I have access to probably just about any lens you can imagine. But the lens that I have on my camera, which, like I said earlier, I'm a Fuji guy. I love shooting Fujifilm. The lens that I've had practically glued to the front of my camera is a Midicon 35mm f.95, the version 2 to be specific. It's this cheap Chinese lens. I think you could find them on eBay for like $400 or $500. But it's this cheap, fully manual lens. The iris gets stuck every like 10 turns. It's horrible, but the images that it produces are just awesome. I love them.
Really? And I think that's a really great story and analogy for what you should look for in a good lens. Is the image quality. And yeah, it might not be the highest end, it might not be perfect, there might be a couple little character flaws, but at the end of the day, what does it look like when you throw it up on the camera?
Exactly. And that's what I think that's probably the message I've been trying to get across, because people call all the time with that question that you started the entire conversation with, like, what's a good lens?
Right.
And people get so caught up in brand names and MTF charts and what the lens is designed for. But at the end of the day, forget what's written on the side of the lens. Forget what country it's made in. just use it and shoot it with it. See if it's going to work for what you're shooting.
And at the end of the day, that's all that's a matter. I mean, obviously, story is more important, but a close second is the image quality.
Yeah.
So I asked my all of my guests these last few questions. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or lens industry, or in life?
Oh, the lesson that took me the longest to learn. I would probably say patience.
Mm-hmm.
Only because I started doing this so young. I think I was about
5.
Well, no. When I started servicing lenses, I think I was about 12.
You see, I wasn't that far off.
Yeah. I would say patience. When you're that young, it's a concept that just completely escapes you, and you just want to do everything quick, and you want instant results.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen companies completely fold because they try to do something fast and they try to beat others to the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a good solid pace and patience are not characteristics that people learn quickly.
Which is that there's the oxymoron. You can't learn patience quickly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
Oh man, I hate it when people ask me that.
Any three that you feel like answering today. It's not. I'm not going to hold you to this.
Honestly, it depends on what else is coming out when you ask me that. Oh man, if I had to pick 3, wow, I'm going to say Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Amazing.
Yeah. Alien. Got to go with Alien.
Great.
I don't even know what would be the third one. You got to warn me. You can't just ask me this. I have to prepare it. You know what? I'd probably have to go with Lost in Translation, as odd as it sounds.
Wow, that one I haven't heard on the show before. I mean, I love the movie. I think Sophia did an amazing job on that movie.
Yeah. Sophia Coppola. The story itself is awesome. The cinematography. If you just watch that film,
it's gorgeous.
You can mute the entire movie and just watch it for the cinematography. It's great.
It's a moving piece of artwork. Yeah, like
yes.
A painting. It's a moving painting because of all the colors and the Tokyo backdrop and all the lights and Bill Murray, of course.
Yeah. That helps.
Now, where can people find you and contact you if they need something?
Email is probably the easiest way always. Matthew@DuclosLenses.com.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple there. We're all over the internet though, so Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. You can always find us. Pretty much any social media is /Duclos Lenses.
Right, and of course DuclosLenses.com.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Matthew, man, thank you so much for taking the time out and geeking out with me on lenses.
Always. I'm always happy to talk about lenses.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
I told you we're going to go deep into the lens geek world, and Matthew did not disappoint. He is a wealth of information when it comes to lenses, optics, glass, everything. It's remarkable. So if you guys have any questions in regards to glass, lenses, they sell every kind of glass imaginable. So definitely check out DuclosLenses.com. And I'm going to put all the information to get a hold of Matt and Duclos in the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/147. Telling you guys, buying good glass is well worth the investment. I've still got a set of my Rokinon set that I bought 3 or 4 years ago, and I still shoot with them all the time. And now I've upgraded to and I upgraded, but added to them with the Sigma Art series, which I have an 18-35, and I just got the 50-100, which is gorgeous. It's remarkable, really, really good stuff. And I will be going up to the cinema level glass. I think the Sigma cinemas are insane, as we talked a little bit about in the interview. So I'm going to be probably getting myself a set of those for my next film as well. Now, I wanted to give you guys an update real quick. I know a lot of you have been hitting me up after the world premiere of Meg to find out when you guys can buy it, when you guys can see it. And what I'm planning to do, hopefully, is I'm going to be going through Distributor, and we're going to be showing you guys the entire process of how I submit to Distributor, our marketing plan, everything. And I'm going to come out in a series of videos that I hope to be working on with Distributor in the next month or so. And as we keep going through it, we're going to be talking a lot more about distribution and a lot more about how we're going to release this puppy in the future. But we're hoping that we're going to be releasing it in the summer sometime on iTunes first. And that's going to be our plan. And then after that, we'll see where it lands, but it will go to all the major outlets. But for the first month or so at least, iTunes will be the place to get it. So stay tuned, stand by, it's coming, I promise. All right, thank you guys so much for all your support. I greatly appreciate it. And don't forget to head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free filmmaking and or screenwriting book from Audible. As always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.